Hey guys, hope your weekend is going great. I'm bringing back Gene Inger to talk about all kinds of different stocks. We're going to talk about Big Bear, monthly option expirations, and a bunch of other stuff. I brought Gene as a regular contributor to the show multiple times. He's been in doing the stock market for decades and decades and brings a wealth of experience and knowledge. Gene, so happy to have you back. Welcome back. How are you?
Well, thank you kindly for the nice words and for having me back. And I'm on as a guest. This is not a paid interview.
That's right. Good distinction.
And you have done a terrific job. I enjoyed, however, speaking of those kind of interviews, because I learned a little bit about it when you interviewed the CEO of Veritone, which, and thank you, you gave me a shout out for, I think, introducing you to the stock. I think that's going to be real interesting. You have a lot of overhead supply in that one. Maybe that's not what you wanted to first talk about, but while I mention it, if you don't mind, I will. That stock was you did mention it was once a $50 stock. And while you guys, as far as I recall, did not get into it, you did a very good interview. There was information that I didn't even know, such as ESPN. I was focused on law enforcement aspect, but what you guys didn't get into was the debt aspect and whether or not there's going to be any more dilution. Hopefully not, because he has put his own money in it as well. If there's not the further dilution and they can struggle through whatever debt issues they have, I think the stock can be a 2x or 3x winner from these levels, even though we're in from around $1.40, so are you, and that's fine. So I speak with a vested interest. But as my regular readers know, if I'm inclined to be wanting to sell something or part of something, I often will say so. So I'm pretty transparent. But in this case, I'm holding it. I'm not looking to scalp it for pennies. And I'm looking to see maybe a 5 print on it at some point. Not yet, but some point.
So I think before we get too deep into our stocks and that type of thing, Gene, I know that the interviews that I've done with you here on the channel have been wildly popular. I know people really, really like you. They like hearing from you. They like hearing about Big Bear. They like hearing about D-Wave from you and getting your opinions on the market. And you also put out the daily market coverage letter, the Inger letter. I'm going to put that on the screen. Where can people find you before we jump in? So just in case anyone wants to follow you and stay connected.
My Inger letter daily briefing is my nightly blog, market letter, whatever you want to call it, which we send out by email. And that's at ingerletter.com. That's the only place to get it. If you're inclined to follow me, you can just subscribe to the daily briefing. And the second thing is the easiest way, and there's no charge at all. And that's sort of my version of giving back at this point in life, is just on Twitter, now known as X, where my handle is at Stockseer, and that's the easiest way for people to follow me. And if they decide they want to subscribe, that's okay. I intend to continue the daily briefing into the new year, at least, God willing, health willing, and so on.
Awesome. And I'll put some of that information on the screen. So I know people are dying to know what happened in BigBear.ai earnings, what happened with the stock price. What's going on with BigBear.ai?
A lot is going on, and a lot is going on that people never discuss. Well, let's look at the chart. A high beneath a high was a warning. You sort of had what you could view as a double top. You had a double bottom. You had range-bound activity. You created a breakaway gap going back more than a month ago. To the upside, that gap was filled and overrun. We waited for it to get filled. It didn't get filled here. I don't know if my cursor shows on the screen when I'm pointing.
I don't think it does.
Oh, okay. I'm pointing to the green line at the beginning of August, green candle. That's where it attempted to fill the gap, and it almost didn't. Gaps don't have to be filled, up or down. They don't. People like to see that, but usually a breakaway gap doesn't need to be filled. This one was on a delayed reaction when you had the rather dour, miserable earnings call that they did, and it got an overrun. It achieved the downside and kept going, and then you had bears come out of the woodwork and start talking, not big bears, the wrong bears, started talking that there's no porridge at the end of the rainbow, and it's going to 4 on August the 16th, Saturday, before I go to the gym. And the stock finished near the high of the day. And there's something that's interesting. Yesterday was option expiration, the monthly expiration, third Friday of August. And I don't know anybody pointing that out yesterday, because it's rather important. The most call options in that stock were at the 6 strike level. And the 6 strike level was hit and surpassed, and we closed above it. So that means there were 19,000 calls with open interest as of Thursday's close. And I have no way of knowing how many were sold during the course of trading on Friday. So assuming that most of those exercise, you're going to see assignments on Monday, and you're going to see some churning and then upward pressure on the share price, just structurally for that reason, or you should. If you really want to get optimistic, you could hope that there's failures to deliver on a lot of those calls, and then you could get what's called a gamma squeeze. But I think that's overly optimistic, although I'd love to see it. And then the stock would go straight towards 7 instead of hovering around 6.
This did come up as a question, and I would love to get your insights on these monthly option expirations and how they differ from weekly option expirations.
I don't like the weeklies. I think I prefer to just stay with the monthlies. I think the majority of options that are written by institutions, like you can have a BlackRock or a Citadel own a lot of Big Bear. You'll say, well, they're bullish. Well, they are eventually. In the meantime, they're writing options. Typically, as far as I know, they're writing mostly the monthly options, not the weeklies. And they're just doing that as an income strategy. And one way you see that is if the open interest in, say, the 6s going forward does not increase significantly, it might tell you that some of the holders were lucky that they made their premiums up to now, and now they're going to leave the shares just exposed on the long side without the risk of being called away if they think there's a catalyst or some event that could cause the stock to go up a lot in a short period of time. And obviously that comes down to the usual discussions of what contract awards and so on will develop, of which the answer is not yet known, although everybody knows or should know what they are in contention for, the most significant of which could very well be the TSA contract for aviation screening and security. There's no reason to delve into the details or which airport you saw it at, which airport you didn't. They're in 17 airports and seaports so far. They may go system-wide. They may go system-wide with Delta Airlines as well. But with TSA, there's one important factor. The lady who is the acting director, there is no director, of the TSA at the present time was previously a vice president of a certain division of BigBear.ai. So, I'm not saying the fix is in. I'm saying they are groomed for this. This is their specialty because of the Pangiam acquisition. And so that's something that I would look to see. The Pangiam acquisition, in a sense, and that the CEO was Kevin McAleenan, who's now the Big Bear CEO. The Pangiam acquisition was another AE Industrial Partners product or portfolio product, which Big Bear itself was and is. And Kevin McAleenan came from there. I jokingly used to tell my readers that I thought Pangiam absorbed Big Bear, which was having various troubles going on with the prior CEO, Mandy Long, who came from Watson at IBM. And keep in mind the letters IBM, because that's not necessarily insignificant. We talked about that on a previous interview in relation to quantum computing. I'm mentioning it in relation possibly to Big Bear. So just something to have out there. But in any event, you asked about the controversy. Part of it is the financial engineering that went on. And that's why when you look at institutional holders of Big Bear, you see AE Industrial Partners at the top. And people say, well, that's institutional buying. No, it's not. They've actually trimmed their holdings. We've talked about that before, due to either a quid pro quo or whatever reasons. And the debt has been unwound. But where did those shares go is the question, because at the same time they were trimming, everybody from Goldman Sachs to Vanguard to Citadel to BlackRock were buying, and even Morgan Stanley, I think, were increasing their positions. So if they think the company is crap or going nowhere, I don't think they're going to be doing that. And then you had the developments in the Persian Gulf area with Qatar, with the UAE. We don't really know the details of that. We just know the superficial stuff, a leasing company. What you don't know was that the head of the leasing company also manages the sovereign wealth fund of that country. And are they the investor? Did Big Bear get that deal in order to allow them to buy the stock when it was cheaper at the time? And the answer is we don't know. But there are the financial engineering aspects that I think they did contribute to the volatility and the roller coaster behavior of the stock. I believe, I cannot prove, and there's no assurances, I believe that is now in the rearview mirror, and that's behind, and now the decks are sort of cleared. I think Kevin McAleman's task when he was brought in as CEO is basically to clean the books, reduce the debt, develop his networking connections and so on, and boost this company. And they moved their headquarters to him in Virginia out of Maryland, although they still have some offices and people there. And you have to realize that much of their revenue still derives from their traditional customers like CIA, NSA, perhaps the FBI, I don't know. But I think that the aviation aspect, which is what he brought from Panjam, is very, very sizable. Why they lowballed the outlook and reduced it for the rest of the year is hard to fathom. I suspect that's not even correct. Maybe it is correct based on known information, but obviously, if they get certain major FAA, TSA contracts, does that change it? And then they can easily say, well, to our pleasant surprise, we're now increasing our outlook for the rest of the year.
So I remember seeing a tweet from you, and this was, so the stock dropped like a rock. It went down like 30%. It went down to 450 at its bottom, and then that dip got bought fairly quickly. And we can see on the chart that we actually closed on Friday at kind of a support level. It almost filled that gap at like $6.14. And the question is,
support? You mean?
Go ahead.
I mean former support,
right? So what your tweet said, and I'm going to put it on the screen if I can find it in post-production, but your tweet essentially said that these guys don't really care that much. Like it wasn't like they didn't care, but it was more of like there was.
I referred to them as arrogant.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm humble.
Tell me about what you were thinking in that.
By the way, my own AI is working, and if I interrupt you, I apologize. This is just me already anticipating what the question is going to be, and so I just start responding. And what was I talking about? That they were very glib and tongue-in-cheek, and they took no Q&A, no question and answers.
And they didn't last earnings either.
They have not done so since one call with the former CEO over 2 years ago. And no, they don't, and they will someday. And they probably don't want to, because the first question they're going to get asked is about the convertible note and the 2029 structure and so on. And that is still out there, but it's reduced. But any normal analyst would have asked about that. I don't think they want to be confronted with the question, and they don't want to delve into discussing prior financial engineering. I don't either, because I think that's largely, if not entirely, behind. So we look forward, not rearview mirror. And when people, including a couple widely circulated, very retail market services, try to look at numbers, say this company doesn't have the numbers. Well, yeah, you don't have them till you do. And then people say, well, I'm not going to buy it. And the same thing could be said with some of the quantum computing until they show favorable earnings. Well, sure, And that's when you hope that the major funds will be buying the mutual funds, not the hedge funds. And because somebody's going to have to when it's $100 or $50 a share or whatever. Look what happened with Palantir. I hate to compare it too much because they're really not identical, somewhat similar. That was a $6 stock. And by the time it went to 50, they're finally starting to show some earnings. And then people were saying, well, I want to see better numbers. It's still a very high multiple. It's been a high multiple all the way through. Still is. And my point being, any of these, and quantums as well, by the time you see the numbers you want to see, that a conventional metrics-based analyst can quantitatively assess, the stock's going to be at a higher level if all goes well. Obviously, if a company doesn't succeed, then it doesn't go well. But if they succeed, you have to anticipate. You have to look, as the saying goes, where the puck's going to be, not where the puck was.
Exactly. So
now, well, go ahead.
So do you feel like we bring up Palantir, and I think Palantir is adjacent. They're not similar, but they're kind of in the same space. AI, defense, border, whatever. They all have their tentacles in different things. Big Bear is a much smaller version and much less proven version. But I also hate to compare. But when we talk about valuations, when we talk about how Palantir is $175 a share at the time of this recording, and Big Bear is $6 a share, do you think that Palantir share price is justified? Do you see correction, or do you see it going to 300 a share or 600 a share from this point?
I have no idea with Palantir. I hope it goes to 1,000 because Big Bear on a proportional basis will do better percentage.
Big Bear will go to like 20 if Palantir is at 1,000.
I just realized the coffee I'm drinking on this Saturday is sounds like it's from Trump's era.
Oh, put it a little bit more on your screen. Can't see it. Meet you in the bedroom.
No, then that
boardroom.
No.
That was getting spicy, Gene.
And then I look in small print. I didn't realize what it said. The Apprentice.
Oh, gotcha.
The Apprentice. So there's somebody that's going to be in the Big Bear boardroom, or that you probably want to know about. And that this very timely comment. And that is, I'm looking online. I actually looked up his name, Anthony Evangelista has been appointed to the board of directors. Is anyone talking about that? No. They talk about the Panama Canal, the Navy, the Army contract that is questionable, the FAA, all that matters. However, guess what? Tony Evangelista is going to serve on the audit committee and the compensation committee at Big Bear. What's his history? He spent decades, older guy, at PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and in financial services. And he also worked at the SEC as assistant chief accountant in the division of investment management, which I find very interesting because I think this very much, what do those committees at the SEC do? They handle oversight, transparency, and incentives for corporations to maintain key credibility. So I think that's a very important nomination or a move to put him on the board. And I think this is telling you that they want to be in 100% compliance and transparent beyond and this is part of changing the vestiges of the old Big Bear into the new Big Bear. And so I would say that this is a solid step towards strengthening the governance of the company. There's an 8K filing on this if anyone questions what I'm saying, and they can go read about it. And that's why I care more about the facts. And I think that fact is telling you something about how they want to run this company, not merely obtain contracts. So
a lot of people are mad at the earnings and the fact they didn't take questions, and the list goes on. Like, I don't want, I heard people say, I don't want my money in a company like this.
I'm mad too, but my money stays there.
So me too. I didn't sell a single share. In fact, I bought a little bit on the dip. What? So I think I'm aligned with you, but I just what is changed about the outlook or thesis for Big Bear? For me, there isn't much. But what do you think? Do you think anything has changed with these numbers?
I think less has changed with these numbers than they make it sound. I don't know. I think that's why I use the term that they lowball the numbers. I don't know why.
Doesn't it lower the bar and make it easier for them to jump over the bar in the next quarterly? Like, I don't hear people talking about that at all.
Absolutely. I hear people saying things like, well, they wanted to let their friends in into the stock while it was still cheap. That's oversimplification. It could be, but we don't know that. They cannot bank what isn't signed yet, but everybody knows what they're aiming for. That's why I say I don't get it entirely, but I like the improvement in compliance that I just discussed. I like the strength that Kevin suggested about going after federal and other contracts in his verbal discussion. And if you noticed, their losses that they reported, and they didn't emphasize that, but the losses were non-cash items. Did you notice that? They were non-cash items.
Yeah, I did. I actually saw something along those lines.
They're not cash. They're actually in the best financial situation they've been in since we've been covering them. So they gave you a lowered guidance. They lowered the bar, which can be exceeded, but they're in a good cash position. And what is the adjusted income if you take out the non-cash items? They don't show it. I don't think they do.
So I noticed their total assets went up and their liabilities went up, but that's a pretty considerable jump in their total assets.
I'm arguing the company is in better shape, not worse shape, and I'm arguing that possibly we're going to see favorable surprises in the next couple quarters, if not sooner. And sooner would be simply the big, beautiful bill. One of these contracts comes through. Can you imagine if they got a significant either border or aviation or drone control contract? And don't forget, there's other relationships that are going on. There's a new stock. I haven't looked into them very much at all, which is also an AE industrial stock called Firefly. And Firefly and has a relationship with Lockheed. Lockheed bought Terran Orbital, which we were disappointed. They let that deteriorate. They lost a European satellite contract, and Lockheed ended up buying. They had an option to buy them. Lockheed took them over completely. So indirectly, between Firefly and Terran Orbital, which you have a relationship that no one has even explored, not including me, between Lockheed and Big Bear. And when everybody talks about who might be interested in doing a deal with Big Bear, I've never heard anyone mention Lockheed. So me, just mentioned it. It doesn't mean there's anything to it. I'm just noting the synergies and the idea that Big Bear has talked about space management too. And what did Terran Orbital do for Lockheed? 12 cubes, small satellites launched into orbit, 12 different products, not 12 cubes, and a huge manufacturing facility in Irvine, California.
What do you think are the most lucrative potential partnerships or contracts for Big Bear at this point in time that we have any sort of clue about?
Well, a DOD and possibly what they're not talking about, which would be U.S. Navy.
We also heard they were having more competition, or there was some sort of military contract that was pulled that they weren't expecting that affected their numbers. So is there more competition in the space, or?
That was a U.S. Army contract.
Okay.
It was actually a newer contract, which got reduced, pushed back, or whatever happened. I'm not clear on where the money went.
Does that concern you?
No. I mean, it may concern them. Doesn't concern me. But Well, we don't know the details. They're not that transparent. They don't answer questions. That's the kind of question I could have asked if they took analyst calls. They basically have an attitude. When I said they're arrogant, they're friendly enough. What I mean by arrogant is they're engineers that have a certain personality. Nice engineers. I have a couple of friends some of my best friends are engineers. I believe they're smug because they think they're geniuses, and they are, and they think they know what they're doing, and they probably do, and they think it's all going to come together and be successful. And y'all, we did this conference call because we said we would do one, and here we are, and now we go back to work. Goodbye, have a nice day, and see you the next quarter. And when there's contracts, they'll be announced. Don't worry about it. We've got the helm. I could be wrong. That's just my take on it.
Yeah. So was this sort of this dump of the stock to 450? Was it an overreaction? Was it a buying opportunity? Or is there more pain ahead? Because Big Bear has always been a volatile stock. It's been up to 10 and down to 2 within months.
Well, obviously, people are going to look at this gap, which is going to be closed probably on Monday. And you can put the chart back on the screen.
Sure.
And you may get some little contests going on. If you look at the range between where we are, because look at the previous two lows. Right. That's what I'm looking at. So now, if you get the assignments and the upward pressure that I'm suspecting we're going to get Monday and or Tuesday, because if people get failure to delivers, they have until Tuesday to make it good with their broker, typically. So I think we're going to venture into that area that is above where we are, but below 650, 660.
Okay, so you don't see it going back to 7 right away.
Oh, I'll be thrilled. I'll be delighted if it does. I would like to see that. I just don't. I'm being conservative. If you have conservative targets, you're more likely to see those achieved.
Sure.
I'd rather see an over. I'd rather see it go to 8, but it's not going to do that instantly without news. But I think it can go into the mid 6s, and you have another little gap in there. But I think that'll get filled. We'll see how it develops. Certainly, the Bears will fight it. But just like when you ran up to 620 and you pulled back on Friday, there was upward pressure towards the end of the day. And some of that was probably people offsetting their positions, knowing their calls were shares about to be called away from them, the writers of those options. So, yeah, I think the pattern it was in a range. We broke below the range because you had a double top and sort of a double bottom over the last 2 months. Now you're going to go back up into the range, which is reasserting strength. If the fundamentals behind the stock were not favorable, I don't believe you would go back into the range. You would have had the more negative outcome that the naysayers toss out there.
Gotcha.
Where do I think the stock's going? When you tell me when they're going to get a contract from TSA. If they got a $5 billion a big chunk of the $5 billion FAA reformation contract, which is also pending out there, the stock will go to 15 or 20. I mean, what are they going to get? I don't know the answer to that, except they're in the running for a number of it. That's why it's called speculation.
The last time we had you on the show was before earnings, and sometimes earnings give us clarity when they're hitting the numbers, and sometimes even when they're not hitting the numbers, it kind of helps to look at the underlying, set of circumstances, right? The new administration, the money being spent on border and security, and that type of thing that just puts Big Bear right at this opportune point in both AI and technology, but also where we are politically and where we are with Homeland Security and all of that type of thing. So it seems like they find themselves at the right juncture. Quickly, can we get your thoughts on Ondas? And maybe we'll talk about Veritone as well, because I just had the CEO on. So
I'll give you a wrap-up sentence on Big Bear.
Yeah.
Too many retail players, no offense, have been playing the stock. You just purged them and you shook them out. And now the people that are staying in the stock have more conviction that the company will be successful. they're looking at the cash balances on hand. They're looking at the pending awards, and they're wondering, as am I, why they downplayed the near-term future. Basically, it will now make it easier for them to, as you say, they lowered the bar. I believe they will surpass the bar, and they will do so with people that are more investment oriented of this stock as a potential wealth builder than speculatively oriented. And that, if you want to compare to Palantir, is what happened with that stock 1 to 2 years ago when the stock was extremely volatile, anywhere between $5 and $20 a share, and then it took off. And you may recall that.
You know, I do want to ask you while you're here also about Rigetti, because Rigetti's been, and this is just sheerly kind of, or earlier we had talked about the options, monthly options expiration. So Rigetti has been super volatile. It got above this like 1750 point, which was very critical for Rigetti. And then Thursday, it ran all the way up to 18. And then we had this huge 8-9% dump on the options expiration date. Now, just looking kind of at the open interest and that type of thing, most of the open interest was at the 18 strike on the call side and 1450 on the put side. So was it a coincidence that Rigetti ended right smack dab in the middle?
I'm sorry. The option expiration was yesterday. What are we looking at? We're just looking at 5 days on this stock.
5 days. Yep.
We're looking at multiple months on the other chart.
Yep.
On there. Okay. So this is, can you put it in can we look at 60 days or 90 days,
Sure.
a little longer time frame? The chart generally in the last few days, okay, that pattern is not entirely unlike what we looked at with Big Bear. And by the way, Big Bear didn't break the 200-day moving average, incidentally, and neither did this stock. And again, everything is betting on the come. The Rigetti, they have their investment from Quanta, and they have a CEO that keeps saying that they are an R&D, but now he's talked more fundamentally about a new computer. This is a question for you, not me, but I will tell you that the action in the stock is favorable, and it probably rallies next week.
Just wanted to ask you real quick about it. So you brought into,
but well, there's a rumor. I know I'm interrupting you for real. There is a rumor out there that I can't dispel it, but I don't know that I can give it any validity. You probably know the rumor.
What's the rumor?
That Berkshire Hathaway is buying an interest in Rigetti or D-Wave, which is, and I don't know that Warren Buffett at his ripe old age, or rather young age, even knows quantum computing, but who knows? And his timing isn't always that great. But I would make a comment that applies to Rigetti and to D-Wave, is that D-Wave's CEO was Alan was a guest on Kramer on Mad Money the other day, and making comments like, "Oh my God, I hope the stock can go up," even though Kramer likes the stock. There's a whole cottage industry of doing the anti-Kramer that do the opposite of what he has to say. That's actually sometimes unfair to him, but sometimes it's fair. And in this case, did you hear what he had to say the next day?
Yeah, I covered the whole interview on the channel, and did he say something the next day? Maybe I didn't hear what he said the next day.
Yeah, he wanted to make it clear for people that are speculating in meme stocks like quantum computing that it's irrational, it's speculative, and you're probably going to lose money, even if they do well in the very long run. And I'm going, hooray! He doesn't like it now. It actually has a chance to go up.
So he said that the day after the interview with Alan.
Yeah, that's partially, I would guess that's because when Alan was on, he cut him off when Alan said something that you seem to agree with me about, which was that certain aspects of quantum computing can diminish the need for extreme energy demand, the big, huge data centers that consume incredible amounts of power, the statements coming out of the White House saying we need 2 times the total electrical output of the whole grid of the United States and stuff like that. Imagine if we don't. There's only one company that backed off their plans for data center expenditures and energy development. You know what company that is? Microsoft.
Oh, really?
Microsoft.
I didn't know that.
So when you're working with all these hyperscalers, can you imagine if Meta and Google and what have you throw billions, not millions, into all these centers, and then you find out a very oversimplified analogy would be the miniaturization of the Pentium chip over the years, or the introduction of the quad-core Pentium years ago. And the end result was you could get more achieved while consuming less computing power.
So I didn't know that about going on Kramer and saying you're probably going to lose. He did say, you know what Alan said on the interview? He said, it's time to short energy stocks. And I thought that was hilarious.
Well, did you notice that Kramer cut him off at that point?
I didn't.
Truncated the interview. And people say, well, they only have so many minutes of segments before they have to go to a commercial break. Not exactly. You can go 12 minutes. And they try to get 5 commercial breaks in per hour. I know, I did this for 20 years. So he could have continued it. He could have brought him back after the break, and instead of going right to talk about Airbnb, which is what he did, and Expedia, which is all nonsense. They love to talk about stocks that are so expensive and so well known that nobody really needs to hear it.
Gotcha.
That's safe.
So speaking of a stock that's pretty new, that is you put on a radar, Ondas. I would love to hear your most recent thinking on Ondas. And this is an Israeli drone company. Is that right?
Oh, did I put that on the radar? Yes, I did.
You did put it on the radar. You actually brought up Ondas and Veritone. So I don't think the interview with the CEO would have happened without you bringing it up. So you kind of manifested it.
Oh, well, that's not my plan. I'm not doing investor relations for anyone. I've never in my life been compensated by any company or brokerage firm, by the way, just for the record. And my opinions can be right, and sometimes they're wrong, but it sinks or swims. I didn't realize that I entered. Yeah, I guess I did, because I'll tell you where it came from. I saw an article in either one of the defense blogs about something called the Iron Drone, not Iron Dome, the Iron Drone. And that was being used in Israel. And then I find out, well, I looked it up and I go, oh, the company that makes it is a subsidiary of an American company called Ondas Holdings. And they have different divisions, one of which is American Robotics, which is the one that is important right now, as well as Ondas Network Systems, which does wireless communications for railroads. And even the biggest fans of Ondas now aren't talking about that, which means they're not looking deep enough. Eric Brock, who is the CEO of Ondas, is formerly merger and acquisition guy from the old Bear Stearns from years and years ago. He knows how to do this. And he did this offering that just completed in like 10 minutes and raised, it was oversubscribed. It was a $150 million offering, and they did 163 million, if you saw that.
Wow.
That was the finale. It's finished. No more shares for sale. And it was at $3.25. Well, the reason it's oversubscribed is the common stock never got down to $3.25. So everybody's buying it. I think the lowest it touched was 350 something. And then it's almost back to 390, something like that. So I think it goes over 4 immediately on Monday. I would not be surprised. That offering is done. He had said, and my initial reaction was, well, he talked about not having to dilute further when they put in $46 million of investments before. His largest investor, and part of that is a guy named Popolo from Denver, who is now the United States ambassador to the Netherlands, by the way, under Trump. So there's another Trump administration connection. And by the way, and what he didn't know when they did the 46 million was that they were going to have these other deals. One is, and I don't know if they had, I will hope it's percentage basis and not money. They have the contract manufacturing deal with a company outside of Detroit so that these drones are made in USA, which is something, you know, the administration wants, and they should want made in USA. And number two, they made an investment in, I think it's called Rift, which is a company in Norway. And they make something called the Wasp, and they have contracts, which is a personal drone that an individual soldier can control and carry in his backpack, whatever. I think that they are marketing to primarily the NATO militaries. Well, if so, that would give Ondas an entree in Europe and in the United States, in addition to Israel. And then there's another licensing agreement that Ondas has made for the Iron Drone to something called, if I recall the name, Thailand Aerospace Industries in Bangkok. And I've heard nobody talk about the fact, wait a minute, now they're going to have these drones available to manufacture by under license in Thailand, maybe to sell to Taiwan, to South Korea, to the Philippines, to our ally Australia, to our allies in Asia. So think about it. When they say global exposure, global isn't just a word here. They have deals and or existing manufacturing capability in Israel, some say in Morocco, incidentally, Thailand, Norway, and forthcoming Detroit, Michigan. So they weren't that. Several of those situations weren't even there at the time that they did the 46 million. So obviously, qualified investors were very interested in giving him over 150 million in this offering. I've not seen one be completed so cleanly and quickly lately. So,
and didn't they do well in their earnings? Like, I think they had a good earnings call and earnings.
Well, they did. I don't even remember. I'm sorry. Stream of consciousness. I'm not referring. You can look it up if you want, but I'm not sure that it matters. Again, it's what's ahead. And if they did not have a good, they did have a good report. But if they did not have a good report, would that change the prospects for contracts in the United States or Europe? Probably not. And I'd like to point out one of the products that's being evaluated in the United States, supposedly by the New York Police Department, or some say the New York Fire Department, NYFD, for monitoring situations, is their Optimus. The Optimus is basically sort of like the Iron Drone, but without the kill or capture capability. Iron Drone, called the Raider. The Raider can throw a net over an incoming drone and parachute it softly to earth where soldiers can investigate. The Optimus is a policing kind of a vehicle. Whether it can be armed or not, I'm not aware. It is operating with the second round of orders from the Dubai, Arab country, from the Dubai Police Department. So it's patrolling the streets of Dubai right now. And obviously somebody likes it. It's been evaluated by, I believe, the United States Coast Guard in Long Beach, Los Angeles, and by the Metropolitan Transit or DOT, whatever you call it, in Boston. Eric Brock, the CEO, is in Boston. He's not in Israel. They have board members that are in Israel. Some of the investors are Israeli. That's fine. And the biggest investor is Denver. So it's basically very Americanized. We are in the stock as low as 78 cents a share, personally. And it was $1 a share when I first mentioned it. And I said, I expect it to dip under $1, and that will give them a going concern letter from the SEC, or not SEC, from the exchange. And that's when you buy it if you think they're going to make it. So I threw some money in it at that point, and then as soon as they moved up and held for 30 days, I bought some more at about $1.20, and I think my highest cost was $1.25. Now I have some higher cost because I have a bunch of options that expired yesterday that were exercised or expire next month. And that's as high as an incredible $2 a share strike price.
Wow. Yeah. So I also have been adding to it. Do you think there's a good zone to add to Ondas, or do you think this stock is just going to keep moving up? Or
I think it stair steps moves up, and I think it goes to $5 when they get a contract. I don't say if, but when they, I think they anticipate one possibly for a major American military installation, perhaps for a metro rail system, as we just discussed, maybe for a metro policing or fire monitoring system. And then I think the stock goes right over $5. And when it goes over $5, something else happens. There are a number of brokerage and funds in this country that will not cover a stock that's under $5 a share. That's why I made the comment one time to my daily briefing readers. I said, this is going to be easier to take it from $2 to, it's going to be harder to take it from $2 to $5 than from $5 to 10, because once it's over 5, you're attracting. Same thing happened with Big Bear at one time. Same thing happened, will probably happen with LightPath, if you know that one, which we're not talking about today, but looks good. They don't have warrants, they don't have options, so you have to put more money in it to control a number of shares. And I'm in it from $1.60, it's $3.60. We'll see what happens. I think higher. But I tend to favor ones with options. Why? I'll go in and I'll buy stock in something like, what are we talking about?
Ondas.
Ondas. See, this is what happens at my age. Go in, I buy Ondas, and I put X thousands of dollars in it. And then I go, well, I think I don't have the conviction to put 20, 30, 40, 50 grand, in one of many speculative stocks, because I have an approach of buying a half a dozen of these and hope that a couple are home runs, 2 do okay, and 1 or 2 might even go broke. I don't know. And if that's how it happens, you end up net ahead very nicely. So what I do is I buy the stock, and if there's options, at some point I'll buy at the time out of the money options. I think I paid 40 or 50 cents for my Ondas options with a strike of 2, because I didn't want to risk the $2. And I'm talking in size, and I have to have options or shares in a company in size, because something happened related primarily because of quantum computing stocks. Do you remember what we did last year? Or do you know what we did last year? Yes, you do.
I think you've mentioned it before.
I bought them all. IonQ was my first one, which I mistakenly only doubled my money and sold. And I said, what am I doing? This is the whole next generation of things. So I didn't buy IonQ because it already went up. I bought all the others. Well, not all the, I had Quantum Computing Inc. I sold most of that one because I think it's the most controversial. I have the least confidence in. And I bought Rigetti, and I sold a lot of Rigetti, and I hold Rigetti, and I have options expiring in January. I'm being very transparent. And my strike price, $2. And those were out of the money, not in the money at the time that I did that. And I've got, and D-Wave was my heaviest and still is. And what's my strike price on QBTS calls? $2. But
Dang.
Basically what happened to me was I bought a bunch of lottery tickets but in the same, not a different vertical, in the same vertical, but horizontally. And fortunately, the whole sector worked out. So all the lottery tickets came in. It's not that I'm so smart. I got lucky. Either the only thing that was smart was the assumption that quantum computing was the next big deal.
You risked your own money and you made a good bet. At least so far, it's been a good bet. Now,
right. It creates the unusual condition of a tax issue if one is trading my bigger stocks. If you want to talk about AMD or Apple or Chevron, you might find those in my retirement account. You might find these stocks in what I consider to be my having fun at my age, my trading account. And the problem was the trading account is the one that sort of went to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the expectation. This was supposed to be the small amounts for gambling, amusement, and it turned into being significant.
I want first question, and this is maybe a big sticky wicket, but I want to ask it because we have the macro backdrop. So we had the kind of hot PPI numbers, right, that came and that shocked the market on Friday. Things dropped, but then by the end of the day, things were mostly flat, so shrugged off. So in your opinion, and I'm not seeing recession headlines anymore. I'm not seeing there was at one point in the month a 99.9% chance of a rate cut. And I think that came down because of the numbers. What do you think of the current macro backdrop? Do you think we're in a fully bull cycle bull market, or do you think that we're on shaky ground?
Does it matter?
Does it?
Does
you
it
tell
matter?
me.
It matters if some catalyst comes along to break the market significantly, which historically can happen in September or October. Historically, September is the weakest month of the year, but every stock market crash has happened in October. But by definition, nothing would be called a crash if it wasn't rare. It's a rare event. On the other hand, we've been having lots of 100-year and 1,000-year floods and storms like too, which aren't supposed to happen so frequently.
They're supposed to happen once every 100 years, not every year.
Right, but they're happening in every other city and every other state every other week. So if every city, if there's a 100-year storm somewhere every week, that's not 100. The Earth doesn't know borderlines between states and counties and cities. Nature doesn't know that. Anyway, to answer your question, the macro situation is fluid. It probably depends this year more on trade deals. The big companies are going to be impacted more by tariffs. I'm not a player in retail. I'm not buying food. I'm not buying leisure and airlines. My original segment that I traded as a kid was airline stocks because I felt they moved in a 3-year cycle up. And then as soon as they start ordering a bunch of new airplanes, they're getting cocky. It's time to start selling. And when they have all this excess inventory and unsold seats and the load factors, they call it, are very low, and everyone hates them, then you can be buying them. I loved Delta Airlines when the pandemic was coming towards an end, and Royal Caribbean, but not now. And I know they're up. I would not be, if you got them, okay. Delta's my favorite airline. I'm lifetime everything with Delta, but I'm not buying the stock. You're in a shoulder season. I think European I'm not buying Disney. Same reason. Travel is down. Canadians and Europeans don't want to come to Disney. They either can't afford it or don't want to. Latin Americans can't afford it because of the exchange ratio for our currency. I'm not interested in buying Disney stock. I'm not interested in the airlines. What am I interested in? Application software and quantum computing. Basically. Same. Oh, really?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. And I think I just don't want the market to crash, I guess is what I'm saying. I think interest rates will go down by 1/4 point. I don't think they're going to do 1/2 point based on the data. I don't think 1/4 point is going to be enough to make home prices and mortgage obtaining particularly easier. I don't think it's going to help car sales all that much, and prices are very high for cars. I think that the government's moves to attract investment to the United States is a new era. I spent 40 years of my life since I was a keynote speaker at the you don't know this, I don't think, at the American Footwear Conference in Boca Raton in 1976, and a year later at the Canyon Spa for the same national group in Palm Springs, California. And in both cases, I said, your politicians are not reducing your outsourcing of manufacturing of shoes, neckties, so on, to China. And You're going to have all your people in New England used to cobble shoes together are going to be out of work. Do something. Only New Balance kept some of their manufacturing, as far as I know, in this country. Everybody else, including Nike, outsourced, and people wanted Nike. Oh, they sponsor a lot of basketball. Well, that doesn't mean they're making shoes in the USA. and now you've got On. So now we have shoes from Switzerland. No, we don't. They're designed in Switzerland. They're made in Vietnam, if not China, and they're fine. I have 2 pair, but what's my point? My point is that we spent 40 years deconstructing the American manufacturing base and saying that we're only going to be a service society. If you look at history, including the British Empire, you will find that when a country stopped making things and resorted only to services, they started to slip. And Russia, I couldn't believe Lazaroff showed up at the Alaskan meeting, and I know why it was in Alaska. The media's missed that. I can answer that if you want. He showed up with a CCCP, which is a USSR T-shirt. Did you notice that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And he gets off the airplane, and you're basically USSR, Soviet Union. Well, he's an old communist, and Putin was KGB head in Berlin, in East Berlin, when the wall came down, and that's their history. And you know why it was held in Alaska? Because there's an international criminal court warrant out for the arrest of Vladimir Putin. So if they had met in Switzerland or in Dubai, both of which were considered, or even Hungary, there would have been some pressure to arrest him on the spot. There was only one country that he could go to without crossing the airspace of another nation. And what was that? The United States. He flew across Siberia, and 50 miles across, boom, you're in Anchorage.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about this, like in 2025 coming up. Since I do tend to be more of an eternal bull, like probably more like Tom Lee than a bear, it's harder for me. I have a blind spot to see potential things that are coming up that are maybe bad. And I'm thinking about 2025, and I'm thinking if this Ukraine peace deal materializes, that would be very good for markets worldwide. If we have a rate cut, obviously, since we're pretty tight at this point in time, that would be good for the markets. And I'm seeing like tech companies reporting great numbers. A lot of the S&P actually reported great numbers. There's just a lot of good things. Maybe that's an optimistic view. Do you see these things playing out?
I've been on the same page as you and Tom Lee for a while, generally speaking. And the fact basically what you're saying is the market's climbing a wall of worry still. And it is. The problem is it gets overbought, and it's going to stay up. At some point, it's going to correct. It tends to correct in September, October, and then you get some buying before year end and carries into early in the new year. That may very well be how this goes. I just want us to avoid an accident. I think we can. I belabored the point. I apologize, but that's why I mentioned the bringing business to the U.S., all of this capital investment, which heretofore has not been seen in the United States to this extent in years and years. This is indicative of helping people project 2027 growth. Why did I say 27? Because much of what is being spent now will be under construction in 26 and start to become accretive to some of these companies in 27 and 28. And God willing, we can still talk about it then.
Right. Yeah. And I keep saying 2 questions, and this is really the last one. I would love to hear your thoughts on Veritone. So I did have the CEO on just a couple days ago, and Veritone was a ticker that you had brought up and you were looking at because of their law enforcement and their deals with law enforcement. So what do you think about Veritone, and now has your opinion changed?
Well, I mentioned this early on at the beginning of our interview. I'm not sure what parts you'll edit out,
Yeah.
but
All the parts where I'm talking, I'll edit out.
uh, I'm looking at the chart as you see on everyone sees on the screen. You see a rising bottoms pattern, which is intact. You see the shakeout after the drop, the big rally. The rally followed, for whatever reason, our selection of the stock. But that was right after the double bottom. Do you see that in late June, beginning of July? Yep.
Right there.
Call it a W bottom. That was a double bottom, and you had the CEO take over from his brother. I think one's in Irvine, one's in Denver, and talked about it as a turnaround and put the 10 million. Was it 10 million or 1 million of his own money? I think 1 million.
So he purchased 360,000 shares at a share price of like 270, 260.
You mean I'm in for half of what he paid?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you do see a lot of the C-suites from like quantum companies and other companies selling shares, not buying shares.
Well, that's normal. SoundHound, they did. I criticized them because they were doing it too much 3 years ago. They were selling every time they'd have a good report, they go out and have a bunch of filings and insiders selling. And yet the stock went up after that. And the bears would come into the various chat rooms and all that, and they would tell you how bad that is and all the insiders selling. These guys work for 20 years to build up a business. They're going to schnitzel, as the saying goes. They're going to ring the register and get paid from time to time and take some money out. It doesn't mean they're not optimistic.
I agree.
They have all the, unlike you and me, we have a few different holdings. They have all their chips basically in one basket. And that basket needs to be harvested now and then. And that's what happens. It's not always a good thing, but I don't criticize that automatically. What are we looking at now? You changed
this is 5 years of Veritone. So back in the day, this is a $48 stock, and then a $36 stock, and then a $16 stock, and then an $8, and more recently too. They did have a good earnings this last time, and it sounds like the leadership has changed hands. I'm not an expert in this company by any means. What got you interested in Veritone?
Just what I said. One of my subscribers sent me a note. Take a look at this. The guy's putting his own money in it. I looked at it at W bottom. And he said change of leadership. I've not delved into that. I could be inaccurate about that. I don't know. I don't even know how long Ryan has actually had the CEO position. Sure. Do you know? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know much about this company, and I do know that it has been in a downtrend for a long time, for many years. So recently there's been more optimism. Will that optimism persist? Will they turn it around? I guess time will tell.
Well, he says they are turning it around.
They got the Air Force contract, which I think brought a lot of optimism in, and he did mention in our interview that it's tough to get into the public sector. And I can imagine it would be. I'm sure there's a lot of rules and regulations and all kinds of stuff that makes it tough.
Although I don't think he mentioned it in his conference call. He mentioned law enforcement, and they hope to get a contract with a law enforcement agency that he cannot name. Do you remember that? That he cannot name, but they solve a lot of murders, which made me think, oh, does he mean the FBI? I don't know. Who else? I don't know who else solves murders. I think that's what he said. I tend to multitask during the day. I don't have a staff like years ago, so I've got multiple screens going, and I'm multitasking. And I'm not sure exactly what he said. He could have even said kidnappings. I don't know, but the law enforcement, that's what got my attention. Okay, a double bottom. A member that I respect in Los Angeles told me about it. I said, let's take a shot. I take a shot, and I bought more and bought more and bought more. And if he's going to deliver, it's still a buy, if that's what you're asking.
I feel like a mini Gene. Inger right now because I
Good.
bought 26 mini leaps. They don't go out further because the stock is like a penny stock, but I bought at the $2.50 strike. I added like 20 contracts, and bought a bunch of shares, just on the chance that they do turn it around. Of course, I'm willing to lose half of that capital. I'm willing to lose, my investment. And I think one of the things, with these type of stocks, these turnaround stories, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. Like Veritone. What was interesting about what Ryan said in our interview is he said it's actually traumatic for law enforcement officials to look at these like crimes, these heinous crimes, right, that happen, and they have millions of terabytes of footage that are flowing in from body cams, from police vehicles, and all these things, and they need a way to sort through that data, and human eyes are just not as good at it. So I do think they're in an interesting, and he did mention that like the fact that they've been around for a long time is actually a good thing because they have the sticky clients. They have the clients like ESPN. They have this. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't know. A lot of people aren't talking about Veritone. It looks like in the market, a lot of people have lost a lot of money on Veritone.
Ever heard of Veritone before I got essentially a tip from one of my members at the double bottom. And it was like, hey, it's down this much. If they're going to turn it around and take a shot. I'm surprised you didn't ask him, say, since you're doing data analytics, why don't you do a joint venture with Big Bear?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if any of these companies combine forces. And I did ask him about quantum, and he is an actual quantum investor, which was cool.
Good interview.
Yeah. Well, this one was as well, and we've gone past an hour. You said let's keep it under 30 minutes, so we did our best. Gene, one more time, remind people where they can find you.
I would prefer they didn't find me, but and if the stocks go the wrong way, I definitely don't want to be found.
That's the whole point of talking about so many stocks. Not all of these can fail, right?
Well, they can if you have a complete cataclysm in the market.
True.
Which I believe you're not. And with whatever criticisms people want to make of Trump, of inflation, of rates, I'm pointing out the reconstruction of the United States, industrial base, and I believe that the United States was getting into a situation that would be untenable. It's generally not discussed that way. They don't want to get people unduly concerned, but I think there was sufficient reason for concern. And you have a tremendous debt issue if you want to talk about macro. And I don't believe everyone knows it's not sustainable. So what do you do about it? You're not going to pay it down. You don't want to lose your Chinese and Japanese investors in our treasuries, but your debts are, so you have to have a high enough rate that that's what this is about. This is not about the consumer getting a better car loan rate. This is about servicing the debt while keeping the paper sufficiently attractive to attract the buyers. And how do you get out of the situation in that case? You grow the economy. You grow the GDP. You grow personal income. You have an average consumer that stops worrying about spending 50 cents or $1 more for a t-shirt at Walmart, and he worries more about making $20 an hour instead of $15 an hour. And then he can afford the few extra pennies for the t-shirt. That's where I'm coming. Unfortunately, we've done that before, inflated our way out of things. But now we're doing it with a vengeance. And when Trump says we're the hottest nation on earth, I know what he means. We aren't at the moment, but he's looking where the puck's going to be. He's looking to the next 2 years, and he's looking to growing the nation and pulling all of this capability and capacity here. Robotics and quantum computing and AI will play a key role. We don't have the population, especially if we're exporting many of our workers And that if you want to get into politics, that's obviously the sensitive subject of the day. But from someone who used to own some avocados and lemon groves in Ventura County, California, I can tell you that the farm workers were almost entirely from Mexico and Central America, and they were hardworking and they did their job, and they were fine. But Trump realizes that too. You cannot continue to drain the capacity of picking crops and so on. You're not going to get the average. The people that are complaining about not making money in our cities, you really think they're going to go out there and pick the strawberries here in Florida, or the lemons in California? I don't think they are.
Right.
They won't do it.
Well, Gene, it's been a pleasure having you on here. We're going to send people over to the ingerletter.com and also have them follow you on X. Really appreciate you coming on here and chatting, and I learned a lot as always.
I appreciate it. Sorry, I'm the quiet type, and you have to pulling teeth to get me to speak.
Thanks, Gene.
Off to the gym.
I hope you really enjoyed that content. If you would like to support the YouTube channel and the website, thequantumbull.com, I have 3 different membership options. I have the Quantum Bull, which starts at $4.99 a month, and you get members only videos and polls. The Golden Bull, which gets you access to our Discord, where we talk about trades. I share my buys and sells. I provide trade alerts, and we talk about all kinds of different stocks. To join, just click subscribe, the plus button by the subscribe, and you'll get a prompt and you can choose which level is best for you.